Hello, it's Shira.
Shalom, Rabbanit, Hamutal.
So my eldest daughter decided last week to go to the Kotel, to daven.
By bus with friends.
By bus with friends.
Wow.
And they took a very famous bus called bus number 1, Kav Mispar Echad, that goes all the way from the central bus station to the Kotel. It's a very long drive. And she said after about 15 minutes, this guy, this cute Chabadnik, goes up and starts going around the bus. Did you put tefillin today? Did you put tefillin today? Let me
to
help
the men,
you.
obviously.
To the men, yes. And then he approaches a guy who, my daughter says, did not look Jewish. And he says, did you put on film today? And the guy is like, what?
What are you talking about?
And he goes again, did you put on film today? And then the whole bus understood he wasn't Jewish, except for the Chabadnik. And then after 3 times, he's like, oh, you're not Jewish? So the guy says, no, I'm not. So the Chabadnik is so happy to hear that. He goes into his duffel bag, he takes out a brochure and says, great, Seven Mitzvot of Non-Jews, that's for you. Go ahead and spread it out.
We have something for everyone.
Yes, Chabad will never get discouraged. He was so happy. And he's like, yes, Seven Mitzvot of Non-Jews is for you. If you're not putting on tefillin, at least keep Seven Mitzvot of Non-Jews. And it's funny because we don't usually talk about Seven.
We don't deal with that, right? We don't learn about it. We don't really know. We've heard about it, but it's not something that you talk about until today.
Until Daf Yomi.
Until Daf Yomi.
So, Sanhedrin Daf Nun Vav talks about the prohibition to curse, Chas v'Chalila, to curse Hashem. And the Gemara
says in the Gemara, they will write it on the opposite side. Levarech et Hashem, Birkat Hashem, because we're not saying cursing HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so we're saying blessing, Birkat Hashem.
And then the Gemara is saying, wait, you should know it's not only a prohibition for us, the Jews, it's also for everyone. And then there's a Tosefta saying, you should know that it's part of Sheva Mitzvot Non-Jews. So I'm reading Daf Nun Vav Amud Aleph at the bottom, and the Tosefta says, Tanu Rabbanan, Sheva Mitzvot Nitztavu Bnei Noach. Dinim, meaning having courts and laws and judges. Birkat Hashem, not cursing. Avodah Zara, Gilui Arayot ve'Shfichut Damim. Gezel ve'ever min hachai. And then they debate about the other one or the extra one, which we'll get into later. But it's actually basic Western civilization rules, right?
So what we're seeing here, that it should be very intuitive.
Right.
It should be intuitive things that you should do if you want to live in a society that can coexist and that can live together. So don't murder one another. Don't steal from one another. Don't have a relationship with people that you're not supposed to have a relationship with, and so on and so forth. So also the Rambam, of course, coming down to Halacha, is saying that those 6 things, so he starts with 6, were giving already to Adam HaRishon, to the first man that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created when he created the world. And he gave him those 6 mitzvot. Avodah Zara, not to kill, not to steal, and so on and so forth. And he said that the 7th, Lo le'echol ever min hachai, meaning not to eat the animals. If you want to eat meat, first you have to shochet the animal before you eat it.
Yeah.
So the
mitzvah don't keep the animal alive while taking away a part of its body
in order to eat it.
Yeah.
It sounds so cruel. I don't understand who would do that, but never mind. Let's not imagine. Let's just take it as it is. So that one, the last one, was given to Noach. After Noach came out of the ark with all the animals, he received the last mitzvah, the 7th mitzvah, Ever min hachai, and that's why all of those 7 mitzvot are named after Noach. Sheva mitzvot, Bnei Noach, the sons of Noach, in order to keep the world, in order to make sure that the world will exist. This is what they should do.
And I think except for the first 2, like you said, they're very intuitive, except for not doing Avodah Zarah and not cursing God. The other 5 of having courts and not eating an animal if it's not dead, and not stealing, not murdering, all these things, and Gilui Arayot are stuff that I think are obvious to anyone who lives in Western civilization, and you add your communication or your relationship with Hashem.
And I think those 2 mitzvot were intuitive to Adam HaRishon.
Right.
If the Rambam is saying that Adam HaRishon received them, I think for Adam HaRishon it was very intuitive. Hashem created the world, don't curse Hashem.
Yeah.
Hashem gave you something, don't ruin it. Don't ruin the relationship with him. And also, don't worship other idols. Because if Hashem has created the world and created you in order to populate the world, this is the kind of relationship that you should have had with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So I think for Adam HaRishon, even those first 2 were very intuitive.
Right. And this whole Masechet, we're speaking about keeping halachic rules and what do we do when people don't. And then we have courts and witnesses and laws and everything and execution, whatever. And in the history of the Jewish nation, we've never did anything to anyone of Bnei Noach who did not keep Sheva Mitzvot Bnei Noach.
Yeah, it's not like we're enforcing
exactly
Sheva Mitzvot Bnei Noach. But on the other hand, I was surprised to see that the mitzvah of having Batei Din is one of the 7 mitzvot, meaning you as a mitzvah, you should have courts and you should have rulings and you should have order within your society. I think it's beautiful.
I think it's beautiful, and it really, you cannot contain a society without having consequences to whatever it is you're doing. If you're told not to murder and not to steal, someone has to enforce it.
Yes.
So having courts of law is actually part of it in a way. And I think
we're not enforcing those mitzvot.
Meaning
we're not going around and telling non-Jewish people, you know, there's 7 mitzvot that you should do.
And I'll take you to court if you don't. So that's funny. But when we were searching for this vlog, we came across different rabbis in Jewish tradition, mainly in the last 100 years, who were actually not into enforcing, but saying we should spread the word.
Meaning so they think that we should be active.
Exactly.
In telling the non-Jews, listen, you are not Jewish and you're not obligated in Torah.
Don't put on tefillin,
but there are a few things that you should do.
Yeah. So the rabbi of Chabad, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, said that it's part of our mission to tell the nation, yes, this is the list and this is what you have to do. And he said, once it was like dangerous for us as Jews to do that, but now in the modern age, we should spread it out and tell them what to do.
And encourage other people to live by those 7 mitzvot.
Exactly. And there's a community called Bnei Noach, and there are conventions, and rabbis are part of the conventions of inviting non-Jews to learn about Sheva Mitzvot Bnei Noach.
That's very cool.
Very, very interesting. And
in Israel, we have Rav Sherki. I don't know if you know him, but Rav Ori Sherki, he's originally from France, and he lives in Israel. He lives in Yerushalayim. He's a huge Talmid Chacham, and he's also talking about encouraging the non-Jews to lekayem mitzvot bnei Noach.
And he says it's part of our obligation as Jews to actually be a part of the whole world and guide them and tell them, yes, this is what you have to do. On the other hand, there's a rabbi called Rav Moshe Sternbuch. He's a Haredi. He's leading of the Edah Haredit, and he says it's not about us. It's not our job to do it. He says
it's not our responsibility. Meaning, if the non-Jews wants to do it, it's theirs, but it's not ours to enforce or to encourage.
And he says when you're dealing with Christians, then they actually part of doing avodah zarah. So I can't encourage them not to do the other 6 because they're not obeying the first one.
They can't even start.
Exactly.
Because they don't have the basic rules.
Exactly. So I think it's fascinating learning about them, learning about the history, about the communication of Jewish leaders with non-Jewish people who are spreading the word. And I think it's a beautiful Gemara.
And I think it's beautiful to see that it's very basic in order to have a society that is working, functioning, and that is encouraging moral in the most basic value of morals. So this is where to start.
Yep. Keep learning.
Shavua tov.